Why were you laughing at me? Oi, why were you laughing at me?
Oh, because you had your tongue out like this.
Like what?
Like that.
Really small.
Oh, are you? Oh.
That was take one. Presentation number 1, the life of servants. Go.
In this presentation, we're going to talk about the social context of Tess d'Urberville's, and we're going to talk about the life of servants during the 19th century, because that's when Thomas Hardy wrote the novel, and being a servant in the 19th century was a popular occupation.
Being a servant during the 19th century wasn't very easy or neither pleasant, as your wage wasn't really guaranteed. Either we expected to be treated well, it really depends on who your master was. The living condition wasn't pretty either. You had to live in a hut, or maybe if you were lucky, somewhere else. And you were totally powerless. Your master was in control of you.
The letter was in the third person and briefly informed Mrs. d'Urberville that her daughter's services would be useful to that lady in the management of the poultry farm, that a comfortable bed would be provided for her if she could come, and that the wages would be on a liberal scale if they liked her. This is evidence that the pay wasn't guaranteed.
This is an extract from the film to show how Tess was treated.
I'm having technical difficulties.
Could you maybe talk us through it? Just talk us through what it was, and we'll catch it up later.
This was an extract about when Tess was being taught how to whistle, and where she lived. It showed where she lived, and her master teaching her how to whistle, basically. There was pros and cons about being a domestic servant. On the one hand, it provided employment which supported the family. However, most domestic servants were single women which were taken advantage of, for example, with Tess and her story. The biggest, being a servant was the biggest occupation for women till the beginning of World War I.
Tess was made to be a servant against her own will. How do you guys think she felt being a servant against her own will?
How do you think she felt, Sinead?
Sad.
Any more?
Pressured into that.
Happy? Why would she feel happy?
Because she didn't want to be around her dad, so she didn't want to be at home.
Oh, good point, Susie.
Here are a few examples of what we thought. Responsibility, used, unloved, defenceless, disowned, betrayed, forced, scared, hurt, powerless, and guilt.
Overall, being a domestic servant, you were treated badly and weren't guaranteed when your wages were given to you. For example, Tess didn't know how much she was being paid until she got there. And that was it, really. Any questions?
Is that the end of your presentation? Round of applause. Any questions?
You know when you said that how when she was in the thing he was teaching her how to whistle, how did that have to do with her being a servant?
Because it just showed her living conditions in the part that she lived in.
And how she had to learn how to whistle just as part of her job. But she couldn't whistle.
She had to adapt to her job.
So in your research, life of the servants, did you see any differences between female servants and male servants?
Most of them were single women.
Single women?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Sorry, Bimpe?
And males weren't that common, like girls were. Females were.
Females outpopulated males?
Yeah.
Right.
Anyone else?
Is that it?
And they were confused.
Can we stop?
Take two.
In this presentation, we're going to discuss the social context behind the Tess of D'Urbervilles, and we're going to talk about the life of servants in the 19th century, because that was when Thomas Hardy wrote the book, and being a servant in the 19th century was a very popular occupation.
Being a servant during the 19th century wasn't very pleasant, as your wage wasn't guaranteed, either was your living condition perfect. You were totally powerless and your master was in control of you. And also, you don't expect to get treated fairly because not everyone got treated fairly. It really depends on who your master was and how the way she was you. Clearly from the Tess of D'Urbervilles, she wasn't really treated nicely. And this is just a word to show that we've picked from the book, just to show you about the importance. And the big ones are like the importance piece, and the little ones are little ones. As you can see, it says Tess obviously and her mama, which shows that those are the characters in the book which are more important.
The letter was in the third person and briefly informed Mrs. D'Urberville that her daughter's services would be useful to that lady in the management of the poultry farm, that a comfortable bed would be provided for her if she could come, and that the wages would be on a liberal scale if they liked her. This is evidence that the wages weren't guaranteed and they would only pay her so much if they liked her.
What is this?
This is an extract from the movie, just to show you a clip of how Tess was treated. And you might not agree with this, but watch.
Was there ever a more beautiful sight on God's earth, Tess, than watching you whistle? I could stand here all day watching you, pouting, swearing to yourself.
I did not swear.
Perhaps I will give you a lesson.
No.
Don't be frightened. I won't touch you. See? What's news? There. You're quite safe.
As you can see, her living conditions wasn't really great, and she was trying to do two things at the same time, clean her room as well as trying to whistle, because that was what her master told her to do.
These are facts about domestic servants. Domestic servants provided a huge amount of support to the family. It also helped to support them, as normally they were poor. And that was the main job until World War I.
Tess was made to be a servant against her own will. Do you guys have any ideas of
How she might have felt.
how she might have felt?
Anyone? Busy?
Are you writing over that word?
Happy. Because she didn't want to be around her dad, who was mean.
Emotional.
Anyone else?
Angry.
Here I feel examples of what we felt. Guilt, responsibility, used, unloved, defenceless, disowned, betrayed, forced, scared, hurt, and powerless.
Overall, being a domestic servant wasn't the best of jobs, but often they didn't have much choice. They didn't know when they were being paid. For example, in Tess's case, she didn't know when she was being paid or how much she was being paid until she got there. And that was it, really. That's the end. Any questions?
Clap yourself.